Right. Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to our corporate sponsorship webinar series hosted by Cosmo Sports and Entertainment and brought to you by Central Counties Tourism and Sport Durham. My name is Evan Colborn. I'm the Director of Business Development here with Cosmo Sports and Entertainment, and here with me is a new face for our series, Mr. Ken Vesna.
What a face it is.
Yeah. Of the Brampton Beast Hockey Club, Vice President of Business Operations for the team. So thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. It's great. It's a great concept you guys are doing, and glad to be a part. Hopefully I can live up to the lofty bar set by our fearless leaders. So.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the series brought to you by Central Counties Tourism and Sport Durham. So special thanks to both of those groups. As normal, a couple housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any trouble seeing anything that's on the computer behind you, like right now where it's a dark screen, all the slides will be made available afterwards. So if you have any trouble reading anything, don't worry about it. We're going to send the slides out to everybody afterwards. We would like to reserve the last few minutes for some Q&A. If you're looking on the YouTube screen, in the top right corner of the screen, there's a live chat. If you can't see it, you may have to exit out of the full screen. But we have Michael here behind the camera that's going to be monitoring that live chat throughout. So if you have any questions, please submit them. There is a bit of a delay on the broadcast, so it's about 10 seconds or so. So if you have a question, submit it, because if you wait right to the end, we may not see it before we actually wrap up here on our end. So submit questions as you go. If we also discovered you do need to have a Google account if you want to submit any questions through the live chat. So if you want to submit a question, you have a Google account, all you have to do is sign in. If you don't, you can always reach us by email. So if you go to cosmosports.com and click on our team, all of our emails are there. So feel free to send that to myself, or you can send it to info@cosmosports.com. You can do that during the broadcast or after we're wrapped up. If any questions come to mind afterwards, please feel free to send any questions, and we're happy to address those. But hopefully we'll have some questions at the end that we can address about this topic. So to jump right in, so today's episode is how to pitch and negotiate your next sponsorship deal. So obviously a very, very important concept, and one that really, when most people kind of think of sponsorship, this is kind of what they're thinking about. They're thinking about this is kind of the moment where you get started and you jump in, but not necessarily the case, right? As we've seen, we've done a few episodes.
No, in my history, sort of 11 years in the business, it's never been the case. It's you don't you think about this stage of the process, but it's never been where you just sort of jump in. So, I know that you guys have gone through each step of the process, and I've listened to the podcast, and it's been great so far. So that really, by this point in the process, your homework's been done. This really becomes it's more laid out than I think the initial meetings and that sort of thing. It's a little bit more laid out for you at this point in the process.
Right. Great. So for today's agenda, what the hopeful takeaways will be, one is that we're going to go through step by step the actual proposal document that you're going to be presenting to your potential sponsor. We're going to go kind of through step by step some key elements that you want to have in that proposal. And we're going to go through both kind of the presentation and a written proposal that you may want to give to that prospect. We're going to talk a little bit about in your actual presentation and meeting how to bring that proposal to life, how to get the potential sponsor excited about what you're proposing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and then finally we're going to talk a bit about how to follow up with that prospect once the presentation is over. As we'll discuss, pretty unlikely that someone's going to make a decision right there on the spot. So while this would be really nice to be kind of the end of the process and get into the activation side, unfortunately, this is still kind of right in the thick of things. So,
absolutely. Yep.
Great. So, just to kind of frame where we are, we wanted to share kind of what we've gone through so far through our first 4 episodes. So our first episode, we talked a lot about what sponsors want, trying to put ourselves in their shoes, understand what they're looking for from a sponsorship and their sponsorship marketing program overall. So we talked about that. In our second episode, we talked about what, as properties and events and organizations, what do we have to offer sponsors and what's it worth? So making sure that we're not going in too high, we're not undervaluing what we have, that we have an understanding of what something's worth roughly. So we went through that. Our third episode really looked at who to reach out to for sponsorship. So, how to identify a decision maker at a company and how they like to be approached, and how to identify who they are, how to find out how to contact them, all those types of things. In our most recent episode, was that first initial meeting that you get with that sponsor. So hopefully, like we talked about in episode 4, hopefully that's at their place of business. You're learning all about their business and their goals and their objectives, which brings us to today. So where we get into really the pitch and negotiation. So just a couple guidelines here. Some really overarching topics and themes that are really kind of present throughout this whole process here. So one is that a theme that's really been consistent through the first 4 episodes is that it's all about them, and that that there are some companies out there that will want to sponsor an event or a cause or an organization based on the merits of that event and that cause. But in a lot of cases, more often than not, it's about them and their objectives and goals, and that's what's going to lead them to want to sponsor. So while it's still really focused on them, this part really becomes a bit of a transition point where we start, for the first time, really start to kind of talk about ourselves and but not really all about ourselves. It's really about how can we help them.
Well, and that's it. And hopefully to this point in the process, you've really positioned yourself as that trusted advisor. And that's sort of, my approach, and it's similar to Carrie's, and is you want to be in that situation where you're coming in as the expert and you're helping them with their situation. And at this point in the process, this is where you are presenting your recommendations for how to improve their business or how to solve their issues. So it's still, yes, you are talking about what you can do, but it's in context of their issues and their stuff. So that's the key. I think the mistake that people make always is, even if they take the right steps to this point, they come in with their proposal and it's just going through the pitch and it's head down, looking at the page, going through the bullet points, and not pausing to see, okay, is this really helping the prospect? Right. So that's the point of the stage. Is yes, it is about what you have to offer, but it's in context of what they need.
Yeah, for sure. Which actually is a good segue into the second bullet here, which is you really want to show in this pitch that you listen to them in those first few meetings, that it wasn't all just for show, that you actually do genuinely care about their business and their objectives, and think there's an actual partnership here, not just a revenue opportunity for your side. So
absolutely.
And so one way to show that quite simply that you listened is just is to reiterate a little bit back to them what they told you. So the example here we have in the quote here is just framing it in the sense of based on what you told me about X, this is why we've included Y, because we think it's going to help you achieve Z. So really reiterating back to them what they've told you is a good way to show that you've listened. So the last kind of overarching theme here on this slide here is you want to at this stage, you want to bring this presentation with you and you want to walk them through it, as opposed to sending something by email or sending something like that. So why do you think it's important that you're there and walking through the presentation with them, as opposed to sending it by email?
It's just like the whole rest of the process. It's just it's more important at this stage than any other stage to be in person. But it's just like anything else. You're still trying to build that relationship, as I said, as the trusted advisor. And it's me personally, I like to have 2 people with me. I like to have, typically in the position I'm in now with the hockey team, it's having a junior person with me for sure. And often it's to let them do the presenting of the document, of the proposal, of the pitch, because then I can have eye-to-eye contact with the prospect. And if you're not looking at it with them in person, you're not seeing their reaction to different points. You're not seeing if they disagree with you on something, and then you can quickly adjust your approach. You're not seeing what they really like. You can really tell nonverbal is massive, and so you can really tell what's connecting with them. In person is absolutely vital. Deals get made at this stage of the process, and it's by understanding, okay, this is what he or she is reacting well to, this is what they don't love, and talking through why they don't love it. And if you just email that package over, you're not going to have that discourse. You can even say, the by far the less preferable but acceptable situation is go through it with them over the phone. Right. But you're still missing that person to person, that ability to read how they're reacting to the proposal as it's being presented.
Right.
you lose so much information if you're not in person. So, there's look, if you do enough of these, there's always going to be situations where you have to email. You're not going to have the opportunity to present in person, and then but the reality is your close rate is going to be much lower in those situations. You've got to do everything you can to get in person.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so really now getting into the thick of the proposal and the presentation. So we're going to go through kind of some step by steps and some elements that you really want to have in there. So so the first one, may seem really obvious if you're handing over a printed presentation or a written document, is you want to have a cover page. But one thing that we like to do that maybe helps that cover page stand out a little bit more is we like to incorporate their branding just into the overall template of the presentation and everything. So why do you think that's important?
Just like anything else in sales, the person you're talking to wants to be able to picture themselves in that situation. So if they're trying to make a decision whether to move forward with you, they want to feel comfortable. Okay, I can see myself doing this or see this being successful. And by superimposing your logo on, even if it's very rudimentary, we have our junior staff do it. They don't have the greatest Photoshop skills in the world. Sometimes it's just pasting their logo on top of stuff. But even taking it that little step, that little bit of effort allows them to A, connect better with what you're presenting, but B, also shows that you've made that step and that you do care about the process enough about them as a prospect and helping them enough to take that extra step.
Yeah.
Because it's just too easy to sort of put together sort of a menu and hand it over.
Right.
When you take that extra step, it means a little bit to them.
For sure. So cover page, at the very simplest, putting having their logo on that cover page, incorporating their brand colors into the templates where you can, like you said, incorporating their logo into pictures, really trying to bring it to life. All that kind of stuff can really make a big difference. So the second one that we wanted to touch on at the beginning here is an executive summary. Now, this is probably more so for your written proposal as opposed to a PowerPoint presentation or something like that. But executive summary is a really good idea to have. It's typically one page summary and really succinctly describing everything that is in this proposal. Why do you think that's an important element to include?
Well, look, ideally you have enough time here to walk through the whole thing in detail and go over objections, go over everything. Hopefully you're talking to the right person. In bigger companies, it's very likely that the person's going to have to go back and talk to a boss or to another person on their team. And if that's going to be emailed out, if that's going to be distributed, more often than not, they're going to look at the first page, look at the last page for the price, and that's going to be that. So if you do a really good job on that executive summary and make sure it's really succinct and connects the dots for them, you're going to have a better chance of making an impression, a positive impression on those people that you're not going to get that one-on-one interaction with. And then, it just gives you a better shot at winning them over.
For sure. It's very well named executive summary. It's designed for a high-level executive, doesn't necessarily have the time to read the whole proposal.
Absolutely.
So those are the first two kind of points there. So next, really, again, the company is interested to this point. It's about them. They feel that somewhere in your audience that their potential customers are hiding there somewhere.
Yep.
So it's good, early on to kind of show that you do, in fact, have their audience lying somewhere in your audience somewhere. So it should be based on data, and you want to show that there's that connection. So we have a Venn diagram here. It's because that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's not going to be perfect.
Yep.
Your entire audience is not going to fit the profile of their target customer. So you want to try to figure out, okay, where's the overlap and how big of an opportunity is that for this potential company. So it's one thing, people might be wondering at this stage when it comes to audience is, how do I know enough about who are coming to our event, or how do I know that there's an overlap of the audience, or am I just taking my best guess, or what should I be doing there?
Sometimes, sometimes you are, and it obviously depends on the event and what you are selling and how much data you do actually have for that. There's some events out there you'll have done some research and done some real scientific stuff that'll really nail down exactly. And there's a danger in both of those. One, if you don't have that research, it's kind of good because you can anecdotally just sort of, okay, this is our typical profile of the people coming to our event, and you can marry it a little bit. If you have those numbers nailed right down, it's great if it fits what they need. So it can tie your hands at times, but that is always good. And presenting it effectively is the key.
Yeah.
And that's where really at this stage, the work you've done leading up to this point, listening to what their pain points are, listening to who they're trying to target is so, so important.
Yeah.
If you've done a good job to this point of doing all that and listening and researching, then this point is, you're just connecting the dots. You're saying, here, this is who we have coming in. It fits perfectly. Or, and it's a chance, honestly, it doesn't happen often, but this may be where you have to be honest and say, you know what, a traditional approach may not fit and we may not get to these, but here's what we can do instead.
Yeah.
So, it does take, you got to be sincere about it. Make up numbers by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm guessing most of the events and the people watching are maybe don't have all the numbers spelled out. And that's where you can get creative and so look, okay, what is the typical profile, or what, it's not just the majority that matters. There's 30% of our group approximately is families as well as young professionals or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Let's figure out a way to specially target them. So that's where you can get super creative and just show where that marriage is.
Yeah, for sure. So you've kind of described a bit of you've got your executive summary, you've incorporated their branding, you've kind of shown, okay, there's a strong overlap here in terms of audience. We can help you reach the right people that you're trying to reach.
Yeah.
Next is really where you can start getting into what I guess a lot of people would consider the fun part of sponsorship, and that's where you get to let the creative juices flow and come up with some creative ways to actually bring that brand to life. So when you're taking through sponsors with all these different activation opportunities, I mean, what sort of things are they looking for? What do they want to know about activations?
All sorts of things. And this is where it's important not only to know what they're looking for, but also what you're capable of and know as much about your event as possible. So if you're specifically talking about activations and you're getting beyond sort of the branding pieces, like, can I put a sign here? Can I put a sign there? If you're moving towards sampling, handing out coupons, setting up booths, this sort of thing that happens at events a lot. Now you're getting into, can we have power at the booth? Are we allowed to sample food, or does somebody have an exclusivity? Can we sell food? Like, those are all lines. You've got to look at who you're talking to. If it's a restaurant or a food supplier, understand going into this meeting, they're going to want to know about, can I have people taste my food? Is this something that we can do? And you should have an answer for them. Power is super common. Like, you've got to know if you're selling a booth to an event, you've got to know whether you can get an extension cord there, or how much power is allowed, or what the space size is, that sort of thing. So it's knowing as much about your product and what you're selling as you do about the prospect and what they need. Those are all things that are going to get, if they have a genuine interest and they're really great questions, because at this stage, if they're starting to ask those questions, that means they're picturing themselves doing it. Yeah. They're picturing themselves buying into this event and, being a part of it, which is great, which is great for you, but you got to keep that good feeling going by having those answers. For sure. That's the big thing that they're looking for. If it's still a branding exercise and they want to have signs, I mean, they're going to ask a lot of things about exclusivity, if they're a bank, they're going to want to know if any other banks are going to be there, and they probably won't want to be there if there are. It's things like that. Branding's a lot simpler to be able to answer those questions. But if it's on the ground, boots on the ground activation, they're going to want to know specifically what can they get away with and what they can't. And that's where you may have to know what you have, and then maybe you have to bend the rules a bit.
Yeah. One of the things that you kind of open this slide with is saying this is the opportunity to get really creative.
Yeah.
You can, I guess, there's a risk you can go kind of too far too. I mean, there's really cool activations you can do, but if they don't really tie back to their goals, then is that really effective?
Well, there's I wouldn't say it's a huge risk. It's always a good sort of practice to go through, but try to get as creative as possible. But you got to remember, you can't fall in love with your idea. And it's very easy to do. If you get guys that get super creative and girls get super creative, sometimes we'll get caught up in the whole, well, this is going to be a really cool thing to do. And it might be a really cool thing to do, but if it doesn't help them sell more slices of pizza or help them, target more consumers, then it's not going to work for them. And you should put that on the back burner for your next hot prospect. But, it is the chance to get really creative. And this is where, I find that people really separate themselves from the pack. as far as selling sponsorships and selling partnerships, because it's that ability to do something really creative that improves the event for the people that are coming to it and connects the needs of the sponsor. When you can marry all that together, but you can't do that without getting creative, and you can't do that without special activations. So that's where this is a really fun part of it, because it's just it's trying to put all the pieces together.
For sure. And this part of the process is also really important. Reason why it's better to not go with those kind of preset packages. Because if you get to this point, you've done all your research, you've got them somewhat interested, and then all of a sudden you start mentioning these activations that really have no connection back to the goals. Then you're kind of done at this point. So
you're completely done, and it seems like a relatively say simple, but like something that makes a lot of sense. But you'd just be shocked by how little it actually happens. It's just way too easy, and sometimes it's just not having enough staff or not being able to put the work in. But you'd just be amazed at how little that people purchasing sponsorships get approached with really truly creative. And you can tell that when they get when you're doing the pitch, and they actually appreciate it, even if you don't hit the mark on it. If you show that creativity and trying to connect what they need with what you have to offer, then they may not go for it, but they appreciate it, and you still maintain. Again, I come back to that trusted advisor thing. You build that status and that relationship as somebody that no, we're not going to be right all the time, but we're going to have ideas, and we're going to try our best to fix the issue.
Great. So you've probably spent a good portion of your presentation time with the sponsor, going through these specific activations, these creative ideas that you've come up with. Now you want to kind of summarize those, pull it all together into what should be kind of a layered program. So it's not just a collection of individual assets. It's really, you can start to see that this is a program that's actually going to help us achieve our goals. One thing that we like to do at this stage too is kind of start to show them, for all this stuff that we're talking about, this is kind of the monetary value that this kind of stuff would be worth. So, the term that we use and is very common in sponsorship and advertising and that kind of stuff is, at this stage, kind of show them the rate card value. This is what the rate card would be. What's the rate card? What does that mean, and what's kind of the difference?
The rate card, all it means is if somebody walked in off the street and wanted to buy one item. So if you're a hockey team and somebody wanted to buy an advertisement on the boards, this is what the cost would be, without packaging in any elements, without doing any activations. This standalone price is what we would charge to the person just coming in off the street. I can say in my time in sponsorship, that's happened maybe 1 out of 1,000 times. So you almost never use that rate card. Now, I say that there are organizations that do and don't discount and don't package, and so there's organizations for sure that just go by rate card. It's not my preferred approach by any stretch, but it certainly happens. But that's what we mean when we talk about rate card.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So wanted to show this table again. This is taken from the Canadian Sponsorship Landscape Study. We referenced this one in the first episode about the service elements that sponsors are looking for, and just the gap between how often they're looked for and then how often they're provided. And one in particular is the bottom one. You may have a little bit of trouble seeing that one on the screen here, but they're looking for info on results, info and results on objectives. And you can see, the blue bar is how often it is requested, and purple here is how often it's provided. So you can see there's a fairly substantial gap in how often that's provided. So the next thing that we wanted to highlight here is success, and really breaking it out here for the sponsor at this point, saying, okay, these are all the elements that are going to go into the sponsorship program. Yeah. Here's how we're going to tell if it actually works. Yep. Why do you think it's? Obviously, sponsors are looking for it, but why is it important from our standpoint, mm-hmm. as the person selling the sponsorship, to take that onus on ourselves versus yep. Maybe that should be the sponsor's responsibility to see if it works.
That'd be nice. That'd be something. No, it's definitely on us for for a couple of reasons, and we, to be honest, we want it to be on us as much as I say it would be nice if they did take on that responsibility. That we don't actually want that, to be honest with you. To the extent that you can sort of get ahead of the game and define what success will mean, and what, the person you're pitching more often than not is going to be incredibly busy, and you're not going to be the only activation or sponsorship that they're engaging in. Typically they're engaging with people or companies and events and organizations all over the place. So to the extent that you can work with them, help define the criteria, help define how we're going to measure this stuff, and then be the one to let them know whether they met those guidelines. You control the narrative at that point, and that's, it can be difficult to do at times, because if you're a smaller organization, it can be tough. Like, it's even with our organization, that's one of the biggest things, is being able to do that. It's very difficult when you're dealing with 50, 100 different partners and sponsors. It's tough to do the legwork on all of that if you're just a one person or two people or something like that. But it's just so valuable to sort of get ahead of it, to help define what success is going to mean, and then show them how it's going to be successful. Because I'm sure we're going to talk about it in a second. The way they're going to measure the success, if we just leave it to their own devices, is often going to be just pure ROI based on people coming through the door, or whatever that situation is.
Yeah.
And it can be often very, very difficult to deliver on just that, because it's not fully reflective of the true ROI of a sponsorship. But you also can't measure all that stuff. So that's why it's so different. You from the outset, is to really sort of work on, okay, what are we going to define success as, and then following up and making sure that you paint that picture for them,
Right.
assuming you don't blow it entirely. Obviously you're painting the picture into your own favor a little bit, but you're also, again, trusted advisor role. So you've got to be honest and make sure that you're sticking up for them. And the great thing, when I work with sponsors and partners in with our team, it's always, let's measure this as we go. And if we need to switch midway, let's switch. Now, for an event that's a weekend or a week long or a one-off event, that might not be possible, but let's define that on the outset and make sure that we can sort of shift if possible. Or if not, it's saying, hey, this didn't quite hit the mark this year, but here's what we can do next year to improve it.
Yeah. And you touched on there that, some of these elements are going to be a lot easier to measure than others.
Yeah.
Some, as much as, society is really more and more kind of obsessed with trying to measure things and quantify things, there's just some stuff that just you can't measure. So what are you going to do in that case? Yeah,
well, I'd like to have a great answer for that, but unfortunately, like most of our industry, we're sort of wrestle with that. And it's tough when you have Facebook and Google offering real-time analytics on your buys and on your ad buys and everything else. The reality is, in sponsorship, a lot of it's going to be a lot more gray than what we're used to online. So that's where we have to go back to getting on the front end of it, defining it on the outset, making sure they understand, okay, you may not sell 3 times what you spent in plates of chicken, but here's the rest of the impact. Here's, ultimately you will. Ultimately, you're going to get this brand impact. You're going to be positioned as a leader in the community. You're going to do all these things that aren't going to be able to, you're going to be able to say, okay, somebody's going to just come in and say, hey, I was at this event and now I'm here because of your activation at the event. But, as you sort of position yourself as a leader in that industry, whatever it is, that's going to have that positive effect that you need. So helping to define that on the outset, really say, it's going to make it more comfortable with buying, which is always what you're trying to do.
Yep.
But B, it's going to make those conversations moving into, after, getting through the buyer's remorse period, and then moving through the event or the season or whatever it is that you're selling, it's going to make it that much more, those conversations a lot easier.
Right. All right. So now you've defined all the inventory. You've defined kind of how you're going to measure the success. There's a fit in the audience. A couple more things you may want to include. Important to include some stuff about yourself as well. About the organization. This is where not necessary or required, but you can put in things about your team and the people that are actually working at the organization, about your culture, values, mission, all that kind of stuff. Again, with that theme of partnership, at this stage, you want to start to get into, they care about the fact that they're sponsoring you as well. So,
Sure.
And then, so another one that we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about here is testimonials and case studies. Can be a great way to showcase, other people have sponsored us and have seen the success, or this is the type of program they did. One thing that comes to mind for me, you mentioned, approaching a bank or something like that, they may want to know, okay, are there any other banks there? So if you're including a case study, if you're approaching TD, for example, does it make sense to show a case study of RBC, or is that going to hurt you, or how would you kind of think about that?
Well, that's where, in a lot of ways, your research leading up to this point will have told you that answer. You've gotten, before your first meeting, maybe that's something that you notice is that RBC did this in this market, and it was a really big success. What do you think about something like that?
Yeah.
And they'll have their reaction. So when you're at this point, that that's a good news story or a bad news story. I really love to go out of market for case studies. It takes away that. I won't. So with our team, it's not very often where I will say, hey, this competing pet food store did this last year. You should do this as well, because they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that the guy down the street that they're competing with also did this. It makes you seem like you're selling to everybody, and you want to feel like you're, again, that trusted advisor just working for them, and help them get the best they can do. So I like going out of market as much as possible. In sports, it's super easy because we've got teams everywhere, and you can pick up the phone and call other teams and find out what they've done with brands in that industry, and it may not be competitive, or at least on a grand scale it might be competitive, but in the market, it's understandable that some other hockey team has worked with a pet food store and done this, and it's not going to make you look bad. So that's where I like to go with case studies. I do find that it really helps, especially if you have a creative idea that you may have ripped off from another team, which happens all the time. You shouldn't feel nervous of doing that. In fact, I for events that everybody, you should definitely do that. But it just helps. It helps the prospect feel like, okay, this isn't something that's completely random. It may be creative, but it's had success before. So you're really creating that comfort level with, okay, this is something that's happened before. This isn't like riding in a self-driving car. This is like driving in a Ford Taurus, which millions of people have done for millions of years. So creates that comfort level and allows them to take that next step maybe a little bit easier.
For sure. And the other one to this point here is testimonials as well. So something to kind of keep in mind, whether this is the first time this event is running or if it's been running for years, something to keep in mind, when partners are happy, it's a great time to ask them for a testimonial, because you can share that. And the same kind of idea, if you've got a kind of a library of testimonials, you can kind of insert the ones that are into your proposal that you think are going to resonate best with that prospect. So
if it's anything but a one-off event or team, or if there's any recurringness to this whatsoever, you've got to get those testimonials, and you got to get them while things are really positive. Get them early in the partnership while they're still happy and they've made a really good first impression. Hopefully they stay happy, but again, things happen. So get them as soon as you've started to deliver and they feel comfortable. Get those testimonials as much as possible. Be really upfront, because they understand. Everyone understands. They're while I say you want to be the trusted advisor and that you're not selling to everybody, they also understand that you are selling to the market, and that if they feel positively about your event or your team, then they're going to want you to be successful. So get in there, get that testimonial, get used to asking for testimonials really early on, and then log them and put them on materials, put them on everything you can, put them on your website. It's just a really powerful thing to be able to, again, just create that nice comfort zone for the person to make a really positive decision.
For sure. So the last point on this page here is a contact page. Pretty obvious, but you want to make sure that you are highlighting in your proposal and presentation who on your end are the contact people to be in touch with.
Have the right contacts on there too, not the wrong. Sometimes you'll get sort of work through things quickly, and you'll be copying and pasting, and you'll miss that you've got some guy's email address on there that doesn't match your own, or vice versa. So definitely make sure it's the right contacts there. Yeah.
Great. All right. So now everyone's favorite page, the pricing page.
Oh yeah.
obviously you have to get to this point at some point. And they likely know on their end as well that
Sure.
this is coming. It's not.
Well, they may have flipped to it right out the hop, which drives you absolutely insane because you put all this effort into this proposal to this point. But
Yeah.
for sure, they know it's coming.
They know it's coming. So
Yeah.
hopefully, they don't expect that this is all going to be free up to this point.
You'd be surprised, though.
Yeah, you may come across that.
Yeah.
So one thing that we like to do is we like to present an all-in number
Yeah.
at this point. And all in, we're going to get to it, excluding a few things, but all
Sure.
in the sense of for the rights to all these inventory and assets, this is what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's a good idea to present an all-in number as opposed to kind of reiterating the more menu that we showed a couple slides before?
Yeah, look, it's something that I've always done it all in, shown the all in price. I know there are organizations out there that prefer not to do that. They like to go with the rate card or to have discount on each item, but do that. The all in price, more likely than not, it's going to be slightly discounted. With your philosophy leans that way. Me, I in my experience, prospects like to see that little bit of discount there to, not too big of a one, but one that at least they know it's coming, they expect it, and it just sort of shows, okay, we're on the same wavelength here, that we're talking about the same things. This isn't to sound insincere, and I don't want it to go that direction, but by presenting an all-in price, it allows you to remain in the driver's seat as far as the elements that are being pitched and the final total that gets decided upon. If you show just the pricing, pure pricing, here it is, item by item, it allows the prospect then, who, remember, isn't the trusted advisor, you're the trusted advisor. It allows them to say, okay, well, I'm not going to spend this much money to buy all these things. And menu, that's not really expected. You don't see many times you go to a restaurant and have this whole page.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen too often unless you're an NFL lineman or something along those lines. They start picking and choosing. Or if you present it in a package format like that and an all-in price, you're the expert, so you know what elements can be taken out, what should be left in to maintain the integrity of the package, and that ultimately you're worried about. Okay, best case scenario, they go with some version of what I'm presenting. I don't want them to take out the most important pieces and then not have this be successful for them. And that's at the end of the day, if you're selling based on I can get the highest dollar amount and not worrying about is it going to be effective for the prospect, you're going to lose, like, in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. Big picture. Yes, you'll get some deals and you might get more money early on, but those are going to be horrible conversations after the event's done, and you're going to lose. So you want to remain in the driver's seat as far as which elements are going to be super vital to your partner's success. Yeah. And they're gonna take a scalpel to it, and they're gonna say, okay, can't quite make this budget. Can I do this? And then it might be based on margin. There might be costs in there that you have to you might have to pay out to the building, or you might have to pay. So what you can keep in there and what you can take out, and most importantly, how you can maintain the integrity of the package and still have it be successful for the partner.
Yeah. The discounting element. So
yeah.
Something that really seems is just baked into this process. Like to think of it, it's like, people if they're buying a car, they expect there's going to be some sort of negotiation. Yeah. There, you're buying a coffee, you're kind of laughed out of the room if you try to negotiate on buying your Tim Hortons. But
probably Tim Hortons for sure. Yeah.
So if I'm the one building this package, what sort of things am I looking for to kind of justify a discount?
Yeah. You want to know you need to know what the market's doing, is the first thing. So, in our market in hockey, we know that rink board advertising goes for a certain rate. We value ours higher than most other buildings because of traffic and all this other stuff that goes into our pricing. But we know if we don't discount a certain amount, they're going to go to the building next door. So you've got to have that mindset in there. Discounting's a tricky thing. Like I don't encourage people to go. You set your prices so that they're fair prices and the value's being appreciated in there, and offer a goodwill discount if it helps you seal a deal.
Yeah.
We do offer a discount off the hop, but that's just sort of what happens in our industry. If you're doing an event, if it's in your area, you got to know, okay, what's typical, A, what do they expect to see, but set your prices so that don't be, and I know Carrie talked about, going lower, going high. Make sure you're setting that price to give yourself enough room so that if you have to come down on and discount some more than you would necessarily like, you're still getting a good number for what you're offering. And you don't want to price yourself out of it.
Yeah, for sure. One of the points that we talked about here as well is, excluding, so it's an all-in number, but you're not including taxes, other things like production. So if there's any signage or branding elements, you may need to pay for the actual production of those, and then activation, people actually to help activate that. So again, why do we exclude those items as opposed to, again, putting them kind of all in?
The easiest one is tax. So I don't know how many places anyone's gone to buy anything on earth where tax has been included. It's very rare. There are some, you go to the LCBO and it's taxes in. Strangely, that's fine. They do it. It's ultimately the government doing that. Everywhere else, it's plus tax, and people expect to see the price plus tax. So when they're evaluating your pitch, in the back of their head, you want to make sure that they're comparing it apples to apples, that it's going into their, but they're expecting, okay, if it's $5,000, I'm gonna have to tack on the 13% or whatever the fees are. So tax is easy, always plus tax, always plus HST or wherever you're watching from. Production, again, as there are organizations that show the all-in price with production included, and they feel like it's different than what a lot of other teams or organizations do, and it makes them special. And they don't want the prospect to have to worry about it. It's a goodwill thing, and that's fine. I still like to have it plus production, because it's a negotiation point. So if you get to the point where you're going over numbers and you're trying to get into that sweet spot where everyone's in agreement, you can use that. But hey, I can toss in production, and it's still a dollar amount, but you want to keep at least some balls in your court, some bullets in the chamber for you to be able to use down. As you get into the negotiation process, it also lean towards that because production costs, they can build up pretty quick. And again, for the most part in the industry, if you get into any sort of advertising, it's almost always plus production. So lean towards that because that's what's happening in the industry. Don't take on that cost unless you really, really feel like it's going to sort of elevate your status above it. You're going to be a good guy or a good girl, because you included it. I just feel like you can do that after the fact as a goodwill gesture in the negotiation process and have that happen as opposed to just off the hop swallowing that.
For sure. And very similar for activation, I guess, is that it's
activation, exact same thing. Yeah.
You never know. I mean, they may have a company that they work with for activation, and it could be another opportunity for, a good sign of goodwill at the end. We can help you activate it. That kind of thing. So,
for sure.
Great. So like we said, kind of at the beginning here, that it's unlikely that a decision is going to happen in the room. It'd be very nice, but it's very unlikely that they're going to sign on the dotted line right.
They may even say they're in, and you don't have it closed yet.
Yeah.
So they're not going to sign on the dotted line. They may give you a verbal. This looks great. I'm really excited about doing this with you guys, and from that point, it doesn't matter. You could go anywhere from that point, right, until you get that name on a contract.
For sure. So following this meeting, when do you want to follow up? How often do you want to follow up?
Yeah.
When do you want to follow up? What are your thoughts there?
There's no easy answer. The easiest answer is that you control that. So, I know Carrie made the analogy to dentist office. When you leave the dentist office, you're booking that next meeting, and this is no different. You have to be. This is where you have to be really persistent and saying in the meeting, okay, this all looks great. Everyone's nodding their head, feeling good about it. Let's get our calendars out now. But when can I follow up with you on this? How long do you see the decision? How long till you get to talk to your boss and get her recommendation on it? How long is it going to take? So you get all that information at this stage, and then you get if you can get another meeting, ideally into the calendar, that's where you do it. Oftentimes they'll say, oh no, we'll just over the phone, or give me a call here. Try to get a date, or at least a range of dates. Give me a week, give me a couple of weeks to get my boss's opinion. That's where you need to get that information. So really persistent. Don't leave the room without at least an idea of what the range is going to be free to follow up.
Yeah.
And then when you hit that, so if they say, give me a few days and I should be good, put it in your calendar, follow up. If it's not a meeting, it's a call. They may not be there. You got to remember, this is way more important to you than it is to them. It's always going to, no matter how excited they are in that meeting, as soon as they get in their cars and they leave, or leave the Starbucks where you're meeting at, or leaving the venue where you're making the pitch, their excitement level drops to 85%. It's automatic. As soon as they get home and talk to their kids, or find out their kid got sent home from school for hitting another kid, their excitement, they're not even thinking about you anymore. Whereas you're still thinking about, man, I think I'm going to close that $25,000 deal. Yeah. So it's nowhere near as the point. It's on you to make sure this happens. And I can tell you, like, I sit on both sides of the table. I evaluate a lot of advertising and sponsorship opportunities, and obviously pitch a lot. It can feel, I know Carrie mentioned this in the last one, it can feel awkward. You can be nervous of being too persistent and following up too much and too often. And I can tell you, as someone that has a lot of things going, a lot of balls in the air at all times, I don't see it as a nuisance. I appreciate the follow-up, because it reminds me, yeah, I was excited about this opportunity. I don't want to miss out on it. And God forbid, my boss is really excited about it. And if it falls off my plate, I'm going to be in trouble. Yeah. So you're doing them a service. That's the mindset you have to have, doing them a service by following up. But try to set that expectation up before you're done in this meeting. Ask for a meeting in a week. Ask for a phone call in a week. When's a good time for me to follow up? And that at least gives you, now there's no issue with you being too persistent, because they've told you, they've given you permission to follow up in this time span, and you're free to go. But you've got to, I can't stress the follow-up really is what I've seen people be successful in sponsorship. That's really what drives it. It's just the ability to follow up more than anyone else is going to follow up, and just have that mindset that I'm doing them a service by following up, not vice versa. And Carrie was right. Never heard Carrie make that analogy of the dentist office, but it's true. I need to get my teeth cleaned. That's a fact. They're doing me a favor. Yeah. Do I want to go? No, I don't. I'm not going to necessarily call them, but I need to get my teeth cleaned. They're doing me a service by calling me so often, and you're doing your prospect a service by making sure that they don't miss out on this opportunity.
For sure. So like we said, it's unlikely that the proposal's absolutely perfect. There's no objections. Mm-hmm. There's probably going to be some feedback that they give. Maybe they don't like this inventory, or that you brainstormed collectively and came up with a new idea. So one kind of natural follow-up is to take your presentation proposal back to your office afterwards, make those few tweaks, and then send that back to them in an email. And that's a natural way to kind of to touch base there. So.
Yep, definitely.
Great. So like we said, you want to take the feedback from the meeting. If assuming it's not perfect, you want to take that feedback. You want to make those tweaks. Mm-hmm. Get a copy back in their hands, whether it's a soft copy you're delivering it by email, or in some cases maybe you want to print out a copy, drop it off at their office at the front desk or something like that. Something so that the copy of the presentation they have is something that they're really excited about and doesn't have anything in it that they already said kind of no to.
Well, and especially if they're going to be presenting this to somebody else in the organization, you don't want them to have to remember the conversation. Oh yeah, they were going to take this out and they were going to add this in. Like, you don't want any of that. You want them to have a clean copy that's exactly what you guys agreed upon, what would look really good, and then move forward with that.
Great. So that kind of brings us to the end. So at this stage, you've taken your prospect through an entire presentation. You've talked pricing, and you've got a copy of that presentation with them. And as Ken was talking about, you're now in that follow-up process, trying to get a decision made. So that kind of brings us to the end of our episode today. So hopefully the takeaways here is that your proposal, you want to demonstrate really that you've listened. It's all based on feedback that you gained in those initial phone calls and meetings and needs analysis. Is the reason that you're including certain ideas or inventory is because based on something they told you, it helps them achieve a certain goal. So you really want to demonstrate that you've listened. This meeting, you want to get them really excited about it. So so be excited when you're presenting it. If you're presenting it in a dull way, in a monotone fashion, then it's not going to help them get excited about it. So you got to be excited about the ideas that you're bringing forward. And keep in mind that even at this stage, it's still probably a working document until it gets really into that contract form. Nothing's really set in stone by any means, so things can change. So it's still kind of a working document, but keep that in mind. And again, negotiation is really baked into this process. It's a natural part of sponsorship and advertising. So there's likely to be some back and forth that this person has to go to their boss. The boss is going to have notes or feedback. So so keep in mind that we're still, while you've presented the pricing and everything, we're still not quite at the finish line yet. There's still a little ways to go. Hence, we have a couple more episodes to do.
And that's the importance there is you want to have built that rapport, and you want to have yourself as a trusted advisor, as I mentioned 15 times. You also don't want to give away the farm. So you need to be, it can be very easy if you did a great job building that rapport and that relationship, and you've got that closeness, to let your guard down. You want to make sure you protect things like production, like taxes and all that stuff, so that you don't end up doing a deal that you wouldn't feel great about.
Yeah. Great. So with that, we have a couple more minutes here. We'll turn it over to some Q&A. Michael, we got any questions?
We got a couple questions. When transitioning to talking about your company's abilities fitting their needs, is there any value in further discussing your company's skills beyond their needs?
Can you repeat that one more time?
So when you're talking about what your company can do for fitting their needs, is there any value in also bringing up other things that your company is able to do that might go beyond their needs?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I won't go so far as to say they don't know what they need, and that's not true at all. There's some core needs that they're going to have that they're going to recognize, but there's going to be things that they don't realize, that they don't know about your business and what you guys do, that can really help them out. And that's where, for instance, with the hockey team, whenever we have these meetings, they're thinking branding, names on the boards, on the walls, they're thinking tickets, they're thinking the traditional stuff. And when we start talking about marrying them with a charity of their choice or a pet project or dedicating a game to something that they really care about, they're not thinking that when they're going into a meeting with the hockey team about signage. They're thinking about the basics. So that's a really great opportunity where you can really surprise them, which is really powerful in this situation. And that's where you need to be creative, because they're always going to be thinking about branding and activation, getting my product out, talking about the bigger picture, talking about some of the other ways that you can marry their brand with some really cool things and some really cool causes and take it that next step. Again, there's not a lot of people doing that in this business. There's not a lot of people talking about what things like charitable opportunities and ways to sort of put them on their brand on a pedestal as far as it all goes.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as you start talking about that stuff, it shows A, that you really care and you're looking to really go the extra mile, and B, that you are that trusted advisor. You are an expert in the industry, and it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. Great.
You spoke earlier to bring in a junior person to possibly do the presenting. Do you have any tips on rigging the audience if you're not able to bring a person to do the presenting for you?
It's taking your time. For me, Evan might have opinion here too. For me, it's a few things. Taking your time is super key with this in general. Not feeling rushed, not feeling, when you do enough of these, then you don't feel that urge anymore. It's really, to use a sports cliche, it's to slow the game down and go through things and take the time to look up from the page. You should know the presentation by heart. You shouldn't have to, you're flipping through the pages or you're showing what's up here for their benefit, not for your own. So as much as you can, know it, take your time with it, look them in the eye. And so if you're by yourself, that's going to be the key. And one thing we didn't get to talk about either is on the pricing page is you got to embrace the silence. And it's kind of something that takes a little bit, early on in your career, but or the first times you do this. But I really enjoy when you get to the pricing page and you go through, you just sort of lay it out there in front of them. Here's the price. This is what it entails. And then silence. And it's going to could be 10, 15, 20 seconds. It's going to feel awkward as hell. But the person is going to sound really salesy, but the person typically in that situation who speaks first loses as far as negotiation goes. And so you want a really genuine reaction from them to the price. So whether you're with somebody or not, and if you're going to be with a junior person, they're not going to probably be comfortable with this. So it's going to be the more senior person doing it. It's just being comfortable with that silence, right? And waiting for the genuine response from them and seeing, because if you start filling in that empty air space with just gobbledygook and nonsense, then it's not going to help your cause. You want an honest reaction, and that's really it. Again, sincerity is really key in all this, and being genuine, and so taking your time and being able to look up more often than looking down, and look the person in the eye is key.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, thanks very much, everybody. Ken, thanks very much for joining us.
It's great.
So our next episode is back to our regular time. So a week Wednesday at 2 p.m. And our next episode is going to look at common objections. So we talked a lot about how this is not the end, that it's likely that there's going to be some feedback and some objections. So we're going to go through how to handle some of the most common ones and the most popular ones, and how to have an answer ready to go for you. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.